Hi, everyone, and welcome to How Employee Performance and Management is Changing with Copilot and AI. This is our fourth session of the other sessions we've done around the employee experience, Microsoft Viva and Copilot, how AI is changing everything from comms to learning and development, employee engagement, and of course, the more recent one we did was workplace analytics and feedback. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that idea of management. So, of course, that feedback is really important. It gives us signal data, both indirect and direct, that we can operate on. But there's another bigger question, which is how do we help align employees and help people prioritize the right work, work more effectively, and create more visibility in the business? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, really emphasizing the importance of using Viva Goals, making it more accessible to more people, and also a lot easier to get started with. And with that, my name is Richard Harbridge. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of TutorLead, and I'll be sharing some expertise from, how these technologies get implemented in the field, and I'm happy to share that. And the big takeaway for me is that I'm super friendly, so please reach out afterwards because a lot of the things we'll share here are high level and they're not as prescriptive as we'd like to be. So looking forward to your questions and our question and answer period at the end. And I'll pass that to Jamie this time.
Oh, yay. Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie. I'm your Modern Workplace Technical Specialist. So my job is to sort of be your subject matter expert around anything Microsoft 365, anything Viva and employee experience, and Copilot for Microsoft 365 is my other area of expertise. So really excited to be here with you presenting, and I'll pass to James.
Thanks, Jamie. So my name is James Wood. I'm also a technical specialist for modern work here at Microsoft. So just like Jamie said, covering the whole kind of gambit of Microsoft 365 products, including Viva and Copilot. We're specialists in Canada, so definitely happy to be able to present to you guys today.
Amazing. And we're going to start with some high-level state of the industry insights. So we're just switching slides, making sure if you guys can let us know that worked. I know we had a little bit of challenges last time. And we're going to start talking about the employee journey. So one of the things that's really important when we talk about employee experience is understanding that the employee experience starts from before you're hired all the way through to when you depart. In fact, post-departure is still part of your employee experience. What's it like to be an alumni or a post individual? And what's interesting is the discussion today, which is going to be about goals and goal clarity and objectives, is actually really important throughout each of these stages. So before you even get hired, often you have roles and responsibilities, but one of the biggest questions you don't know is, what's my team focused on? What are their priorities? What's my organizational look like? And we all know that onboarding period sometimes can be 3 months or even 6 months, depending on how large and complex the organization is, to understand, like, what are we measured on? What is it? What are we driving in this quarter or this fiscal? Like, what's important to us? And that onboarding is strategic, right? That stuff that you learn as you start to really understand the underpinnings of the organization, what processes are, what matters, what's less of a priority, what's higher priority. It really starts to make you a more effective, from a performance perspective, employee. And so what we're going to talk about a lot today is this performance section. So if we look at the employee experience, the engagement one we've talked about before with a few different ways, with both Glint and Insights, as well as with Viva Engage and communication tools like Connections. So we've talked about those. And on the development side, we've talked about it for learning. Now we're going to dive much deeper into the performance side. Now, there's a big problem in organizations besides just the time it takes to ramp up on what those goals are and align. The secondary problem is how long it takes to get goal updates. So if you think about the sequence that you have going on here, a lot of people in organizations really struggle with connecting with both the why, like, why is my role matter? What is this thing that I'm doing? And of course, with major changes that we have across the organization. And whether you're re-onboarding or you're new to the organization, that goal mechanics, right? Understanding what the goals are, how they pivot from quarter to quarter or fiscal to fiscal, that's really important for us to understand. And having agency on those goals as well, so that they can get cascaded down, and then we can determine how we want to execute on some of these goals, like how we want to meet those goals. That becomes really important as an amplifying force, especially in a world where AI enriches employee agency and capability. And so it makes it even more important for us to be resilient or agile or whichever term you like. And that becomes even more greater importance of visibility across goals. So that's why we're going to talk about goals a lot today. Now, from an industry perspective, we do know some things. One of the great reports was this Forrester study where basically what they did is they determined pretty effectively with a bunch of data points that people don't really understand their team goals. And we're not talking about organizational goals, right? We're saying like even at a team level, sometimes we really struggle. And I think that's a really sobering insight, because a lot of times we've historically thought about it like, the pandemic happened. Oh, we need to do a better job of aligning our employees, helping people understand like what is our priorities as an organization, how are we pivoting, and we do a lot of that top-down goal definition work. But actually, one of the bigger challenges is how do I align my goals of my team and what we're working on back up to that organization? And another reason for that challenge, why it was quite difficult for a lot of organizations to be successful here, is the frequency. There was a huge demand for greater frequency of updates, and we'll talk about how Copilot greatly accelerates the accessibility of Viva goals and its deployment. And so those two things are really important to understand. There are challenges on the company goals. In fact, in previous studies, we saw something like 97% of senior leaders say that they understand the strategic priorities, but only 28% of them could name the goals, right? So they struggled to make the goals consumable, right? Easy to understand, because they couldn't say it quickly or easily. So it ended up being, even though everyone knows it at that level, they really struggled to simplify it or expand it and align it to an employee's needs or a team's needs. So that'll become a key subject point for today. The other big one is that we understand that it's really important to lead by example. And the way that these platforms work is sometimes it can be siloing. There are a lot of organizations that roll out technologies like OKR frameworks or other models that are similar in the industry, but they roll it out to executives, or they roll it out to certain levels and layers of the organization. And then that, because it's not permeating, because it's not available to all employees and it's not as accessible, that often leads to challenges by using it in a continual basis, integrating it in the flow of your work. The fact that you have to go to other tools even and not having them blended directly into the places you're already working, like email via Outlook or things like Teams, is another reason that can be quite problematic. And then lastly, one of the other problems is we kind of set and forget. We set up these goals often at the beginning of a fiscal, and then we don't really reiterate and adjust them. And a lot of times goals need to be adjusted, right? What we originally envisioned at the beginning of the fiscal, especially when you start to break it down to the third, once you start to do third level goals, those can pivot quite substantially in the course of a year. Industry changes, your organization changes, the staffing capacity constraints change. All sorts of things can lead to a need to update those. And unfortunately, while that is, of course, people are working and those communications are happening, they're often not as effective as they could be. And that leads to lagging understanding and things like that, which again creates its own challenges in an organization. So we know it's really important to get more frequent updates. And then we'll talk about that today. Lastly, it becomes really useful to, do I have an animation on that one? Sorry. Interesting. Okay. Well, we'll skip over slide 7. But another thing that's really useful is to think about this almost like a maturity model. And so organizations will start with a vision and a strategy, and then they'll cascade that down slowly through the organization to generate an understanding around teams and objectives and things like that. And so one of the common languages that the industry is using today is probably by far the most adapted and adopted management methodology would be the OKR framework. And so there are competing frameworks, but generally speaking, the idea of saying, here's an objective, here's a key result, and then here's initiatives or projects, it becomes really helpful to start to change how you talk about goals. How you communicate goals is important, because for most people, they're really good. Like, I'll be really frank, almost every one of my customers, they start with key initiatives and projects because everyone knows the to-do. Everyone knows the stuff I need to do in this. But if you don't reframe that as what is the outcome that's driving, and how are we measuring that outcome, right? Whether we've achieved it, those two questions are basically what objectives and key results represent. And often, if we don't answer those questions, we can't really prioritize, and we can't really compare or even calibrate the things that we're doing across the organization, right? The best we can do is basically look at one project and another, look at dependencies and move them around. And that's what a lot of organizations operate under. When you use something like an OKR framework, it elevates that discussion and understanding so that everyone has visibility on what those outcomes, objectives that we're trying to achieve are, and how we're potentially measuring them. And even the measurement, the word key there is important because there's, of course, tons of measures that you could evaluate, but there's only a few that are really key, meaning whether or not, this is going to be successful or a failure based on that. And so there's a lot more to unpack here, but I do want to at least highlight that understanding OKR methodologies and frameworks is going to take you pretty far when it comes to tools like Viva Goals. And while you can, of course, change Viva Goals so it doesn't use any of those languages, call it milestones instead of this or call other words, the reality is, the OKR methodology is where this tool originated from. Lastly, I do want to talk about some benefits. So I've already talked about this a visibility thing, the transparency benefit, but I wanted to do a couple quick breakdowns of other key ones. One of the big ones is prioritization is a really complex topic, and it gets harder and harder to objectively drive people towards the right priorities once you start to move further and further away from those top level objectives as an org, because everything is a priority. And so what helps with these key objectives and key results is because we're optimally narrowing to only 5 or a certain subset from a number perspective, it really does help us reduce the noise and keep us focused on what really, really matters. And anything else is important, but it's not as important. It's not as critical if you think of like critical path, if you're familiar with project management methodologies and things like that. So that alignment thing becomes important. The why also becomes important too. So if we don't understand, why am I doing this thing, or why are we changing the way we operate over here, or why are we entering this new market, it becomes really valuable if I can see how that cascades to those, main objectives like improving community health, or, Microsoft's got a great vision, right, of helping people achieve more, right? So, knowing that these things I'm doing helps with that is one thing, but being able to show like how that maps and cascades up, that becomes a really, really valuable thing to be able to talk about. And then, I avoid the word no. We could talk about this later, but I love the yes and. So if you have the goals, you can say, yes, and if we're going to do that, it's really important that we do these other things first, or this is, going to supersede it. So we should start with this and then do this other thing you're asking for. So, it allows for a little bit more discussion there. I'll pass it to Jamie. It looks like you have a great comment here.
Yeah, I wanted to add a little bit to that. We're talking so much about alignment, and I think Microsoft has such a good story that you mentioned a second ago. Like our sort of big overarching mission: empower every person and organization across the globe to achieve more, across the planet to achieve more. It's kind of our overarching mission. But obviously, we have so many different internal breakdowns and organizations that are doing things on their own. And right, we have sort of mission statements, or I'd say missions in each of those, but how do we align to that one big picture? But just like one really quick story, just to highlight that, and like why having visibility, transparency, and like a tool to kind of bring all that together is so significant, is there is a sort of a go-to-market lead that was actually working on how to work with our marketing vendors to promote some of our Viva solution, funnily enough. And, there was this challenge with both internal and externally. There was some sort of jagged issues with getting people to sort of understand, these marketing folks are doing all this work, and they're, their brows are sweating, and they're saying, okay, but you're still unhappy with what's going on, or it was beyond miscommunication, right? And once, our go-to-market lead had this idea of, why aren't we just using goals? So she established, a goal, and, they could essentially see, okay, what are the things that we consider success, right? Like, how are we measuring that internally in a way that they're able to see, like, what our vision is, so that someone who's, just sort of leaning in as an arm of the project and they're experts at what they do, they can understand our vision and how what they're doing is contributing to our goal and our culture and all these other pieces, without necessarily having to train them as like another employee, if that makes sense. So as soon as that connection was made, they were able to access things like, in a protected way, right, through this goal, see things like what metrics and measurements we were looking for. And they were going, oh, we didn't realize you were actually measuring and taking in some of those signals. And anyway, long story short, it was essentially they kind of got the vision of what we were doing in so few words, right? They were able to see it all broken down in one tool and then contribute in their own ways. So continue doing the work that they were doing in the tools and ways of communicating that worked, and then see how what they were doing actually legitimately flowed up to the success metrics that were increasing over time. And so they were just absolutely in love with it. And I think we're like, can we use this every time moving forward? So I think that's just a great story. It's coincidentally is about the Viva suite and marketing, but I thought landed well here to understand, right, that it's not just about internally, or it's not just about, I think, thinking about that culture piece as like an afterthought. It's how much that consideration comes into effect when we're making decisions about, what we're doing at the org level, and then to your point, like cascading down. And then as we make decisions and work together, how just keeping that in mind throughout helps us have that transparency and success. So thought that was a quick story to add here, like a true anecdote. But
Absolutely. Keep the stories coming. And so you can kind of see that there's like a curve that organizations go through, right, with these things. Because when you start with a lot of these things, you don't use any structured rhythms. You don't really have a quarterly or fiscal pattern where you really think about like what is the outcome, what are the key results, that alignment discussion. And so starting just with understanding that that's an opportunity space that exists in your organization, that other people have navigated it successfully, well, that's, kind of where we get into piloting. And then as you start to see the value directly, often executive teams and leaders, or even we call them squads, but because teams is such a complex term, but like groupings of people in the organization, as they start to use these tools, they start to see how it can help with coordination. And you can start, by the way, top to bottom. So executive leadership team comes up with strategic goals, then we map them all out. Very, very effective, probably the best model. The other way you can do it though too is, let's say I have LATAM operations, and I want to use my network there, where they're going to use these tools to organize and structure goals. And then from their success, we're going to scale that into the Americas, and we're going to keep scaling across like regions, et cetera. So there's lots of ways that organizations kind of roll these out, but that maturity curve becomes a really important part of the discussion. And I don't want to dismiss this idea that while we're introducing a technology, it's actually the change of the business, the way we operate, and the things that this enables that actually are the really big ROI drivers, right? So that is a really important piece. And that implementation of those changes can be a challenge for two reasons, right? Number one, as I mentioned a couple of times, it takes effort to document and make visible, these considerations in people's heads, right, around objectives and key results and things of that nature. The second reason it's a bit of a challenge is because it can be really hard to do that cascade. So actually, a lot of organizational leadership, once you give them the right tools, do a pretty good job of improving their goal definitions and key results. But when they start to get down to 2 or 3 levels, they realize how important it is to have everyone else kind of figure out those levels, right, where they can't really, cascade very far. And that becomes a really big empowerment opportunity for business leaders and other groups to define that. So we'll talk more about that in our demos here, but I wanted to kind of tee that off. And so with that, we'll pass it to James.
Cool. Thanks, Richard. Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of take a step back now and really take a look at the Viva suite as a whole and kind of understand how Copilot fits in there, and then tie that into what Richard was talking about having the company aligned with goals and objectives, and really take a look at what Viva goals is our topic of today. But you can see that diving a bit deeper on Viva, there's quite a few modules that we've touched on throughout the past few sessions. And again, they're generally broken down into these stacks. So you have goals, engage and amplify to really help drive your company mission and create that sense of community through, posts, campaigns, and that engagement. And then we have Viva connections and learning to help curate content for your users to enable that high performance kind of workforce. And then we have Glint, Pulse, and Insights to really give you that data-driven insight on how your company and your teams are really working and feeling. And kind of best of all, Viva works in Teams and Microsoft 365, so it's easily customizable and extensible and integrates with all the tools that organizations already use. And we have a great partner ecosystem that consists of a lot of technology partners across a lot of commonly used platforms like HR, well-being, or LMS systems that really tie into Viva. But today we are going to be focusing primarily on Viva goals, talking about not only how it can benefit your organization as a whole, but how individuals in the organization can benefit from it as well. We're also going to touch on how Copilot is integrated into Viva goals, just kind of like we have with the other modules that we talked about in the previous sessions. And we're also going to go through a demo so you can really get a feel for what Viva goals looks like. So when we talk about Copilot in Viva, it's really going to work in a lot of different ways. So first, there's new Copilot features that are available directly in the Microsoft Viva apps. And then again, just something to call out that we've touched on this before, but Copilot in Viva is going to be available in the premium Viva experience. So, when you access Viva today, if you just have a regular E3 or E5 license with Viva, you have a ton of features, but you're not going to see Copilot in there. But if you do the add-ons for the specific modules or the Viva suite as a whole, then you're going to start seeing Copilot pop up throughout your Viva experience. We also have data and intelligence from Viva apps that'll be integrated directly into Microsoft Copilot chat experience, so that's going to be awesome as well. And then finally, we're introducing a new Copilot dashboard that you can access in Viva Insights. That's really going to enable leaders and organizations to plan their AI readiness, drive adoption, and really measure the impact of Microsoft 365 Copilot. And so, in our last few sessions, we've really seen how Copilot in Viva Engage can provide insightful conversation starters based on sentiments and trending topics across the workplace communities. In Viva Learning, we looked at how it can help you create structured learning collections and find the right learning resources and summarize the content for you. And then in Glint, we saw how Copilot can, highlight trends from comments in a really robust way to quickly zero in on top issues and give leaders the context that they want to take effective action on. And then finally, we looked at Copilot in Viva Insights, which really enables leaders to use natural language prompts to generate personal and dynamic reports that answer questions about their teams and their organization. But again, today we're going to be focusing on Viva Goals, and Copilot in Goals actually helps you to generate goals and recommendations from existing strategy documents. You can refine suggestions with conversational AI, and you can actually publish progress summaries based on that contextual data that Copilot pulls up for you. So it's going to be really cool, and we'll show you how that works a little bit later on today. But now I just want to pass it over to Jamie so she can dive a little bit deeper into the Viva Goals experience and explain a little bit more about how it works.
Sorry, my mouse went crazy and I lost the meeting for a second. Yeah, awesome. So let me just take control here. Perfect. Yeah. So before we get into the demo, we just like to essentially set the stage, right? Now that you've sort of understood a little bit more about the approach, like the why behind creating something like an OKR solution and like the importance of driving alignment and what we've discovered and how disjointed things can be. It's like, how is Viva Goals sort of helping to solve for that, right? And so essentially our answer to those challenges was Viva Goals. And in fact, this was originally an acquisition that we made back in 2021 from a very established solution called Ally.io. So this is something that is a well-researched and developed framework when it comes to OKRs, and we really wanted to bring it into the fold and say, okay, this is absolutely aligning to the research that we're doing and our goals. Like those words are getting repurposed so many times, but our goals as Microsoft and what we want to develop for this employee experience platform just fit so well. And so we've now developed that and integrated it into the system. And then we'll talk a little bit more about integrations in a minute further than that. But yeah, you've already seen a little bit of what what challenges face organizations. So now let's kind of understand what that can look like, what the benefits of using Viva Goals is, right? To drive that mission and purpose alignment. And it happens in a number of ways, right? So we want to look at how things benefit the individual, how things benefit the team, and then how we're looking at it from an organizational perspective. So when we're starting to build out those OKRs, or we're thinking about, what are our objectives? How do we support each individual using Viva Goals? We want to start by listing those organizational's main goals and objectives. And that can look like a number of things, right? That's when we're thinking about bigger picture. Like I said, with Microsoft, that we have that big overarching mission of, driving empowerment across the planet, every company and person to achieve more. But we also want to break that down to, okay, what does that mean? Like, what's a tangible thing that we can do, right? So something maybe more relatable would be, maybe you're sitting down and you want to create plans for your fiscal year, right? You want to start to think about expanding your market reach or innovating product lines, if that's something you do. Or a really common one too is if you've got a customer base, right? How can we start to measure or drive more positive engagement? That could be a really common type of objective you want to set. And then we want to say, okay, now that we understand what our objective is, how can we align the work that we're doing to that goal or to that objective? And so we ask ourselves, okay, how are we now creating these projects to get this work done? And how can we make sure that each of these projects has that in consideration, right? That we're thinking about, okay, I'm not just arbitrarily creating these projects. I really, truly am thinking about the purpose and what's driving us to establish this. And does everyone on this team or on this project understand what the impact is that they're making, right? So it's this constant frame of feedback that we're going through. Then we want to take that from like a team level, right, where we're all contributing to a project, and down to the individual, right? So we don't only want to say, hey, team, this is what you have to do, and then that's it, right? We want to say, yes, here's what you have to do. Here is how we're actually measuring success. And that way, when the individuals on that team are actually contributing at the task level, that they truly understand how, hitting that checkbox and driving that sort of completion bar a little bit further, what that really means in their tangible day-to-day. And just to loop it back to Richard's quick point about, what we've learned through research is that people do feel that, they're kind of coming in and they're task bound and doing tons of stuff, and they could be doing that for weeks. But then you ask them, cool, so what are you doing, or where are you? Do you feel like you understand how you're like what you've been doing the last 3 weeks, what the impact has been on the project? Could they speak to where everyone is in terms of like what else needs to get done, and do we really understand the position? And most people can't, because they don't see that bigger picture, or again, they don't understand the driving purpose. So again, thinking about that from the top and then down to that task level, then they're really driving that success. But we also want to think about the culture of that. Helping people stay motivated is another really key part, right? So you'll notice in the middle there, that's really important for us to do things like at these pivotal points throughout the not only goal building, but when we're looking at, let's say objective building. As we're working towards meeting that objective, we are making a concerted effort to say, hey, recognizing people who are doing successful work, right? Because we have this visibility, we need to use that as a tool to drive that feedback back to the employees to say, hey, I don't just see it, but I want to acknowledge it. And that continues to actually drive, positive long-term engagement and success. So that feeds into driving engagement between each other for successful collaboration and connectivity, and then also with like rewards and recognition. And then last is kind of looking at the positives of what Viva Goals gives you, in addition to all these pieces we've seen so far, is that we want to give you an easy way to visualize all the successes and all the different attributes of what's going on today, right? So it's a lot of moving parts. Yes, we have an objective and we're making it sound easy talking about the concepts now, but that's a lot, right? That's potentially could be tens or hundreds of people collaborating together and totally different teams that rely on each other to meet these objectives. So by giving you visual tools, that gives individuals the ability to see what they're doing every day. It gives those teams to see how that breaks down at a higher level. So a manager or let's say like a department head could take a look at this, and then even further up, how a leader has their own views and visuals to see how everything is going, so they don't have to constantly check in. And I think a lot of us have familiarity with the concept of like internal meetings just to have another meeting. So let's save ourselves time. And now essentially this tool is giving us this transparency, right, to see everything, but also supporting each of those different types of ways we're going to engage with this content and data, right? So it's just a quick high level. But when we talk about at the individual level, we really want to bring that daily work accessibility to your employees, right? So they can not only see those high level objectives in, plain language, they're seeing some of, like I said, those overarching metrics where it's helping them really prioritize their own day to day. And I think that's really significant. It's not just, again, an overload of, hey, I have to do 10 million things and I don't know what I'm doing is more important today than tomorrow, or which of these tasks I should do in what order. Again, this is structuring that for you so I can essentially see what is the weight of certain tasks. And that again gives me the way to do things like comment and connect with others. And hey, I can see that so-and-so is on this project too, and they're about 25%. There's some of a blocker there where I need to have certain things done. They already know who to go to. They don't have to talk to 10 other people. We can really have visibility across the board. Excuse me. And then in addition to that, again, you have a tool that serves you to accomplish this. So connecting people, data points, and again, that high level visibility. But what's also important, I think, is to know that we don't all just use Viva goals, right, to accomplish our tasks. We use other project management solutions. As you can see, some listed there, both first party and third party is even an option as well, right? So when it comes to first party options, some people are tracking things in Excel or doing PowerPoints. I think a really common example of why goals is valuable when it comes to integrating solutions is things like Azure DevOps. So anyone out there who has your developer team, or your engineers internally who are in their own world building their apps, they just kind of do what they're told, and it's a whole different world over there. It's tough sometimes to translate how far along things are, but with a tool like Viva Goals, they know these measurable ways to talk about, like, hey, these are our success points, and having a tool like Azure DevOps that is helping them talk about, hey, here's where we are in our project, in our development, and it is suited for that workload. It now integrates with Viva Goals, so it's able to tell the story of where they're at, translate it to a way that everyone else along the project and in leadership understands, so we can all work together effectively and seamlessly. But like I said, that can even extend to things like third-party integrations too. So it's not just all these Microsoft tools coming together. Do you use Asana? Do you use other like I said, project management tools, but even things like Jira, et cetera. Those all can integrate right into the platform. So we've built those integrations and connectors in. It's a matter of you kind of setting up whatever way works best for your business. So hopefully that gave a quick overview of just high level. You're going to see some demos in the next moment. But now that we understand kind of how Viva Goals can work, right, how it's giving that purpose and alignment, how we're building that into the tool, now we're going to talk about essentially what that means for Copilot, right? And so, or the Copilot introduction of Copilot into this space. And so I think a lot of folks, when they first come into this, they think, this is a lot because it's a new framework. It's not just learning how a tool works. You have to understand the thinking, right? The methodology. And getting everyone aligned to that, while it seems great, I know that still comes with a little bit of a learning curve or some challenges to make sure that everyone feels they understand and can adopt. So yes, we have to learn how to use the methodology and the tool. And what I love about the introduction of Copilot here is saying, hey, let's help you do that. Let's help you understand how to turn your desires and your goals into something that translates into the tool, and vice versa. How can I use Copilot to interpret what's going on today? So while it's going to have this potential for so much more complexity, I can use it to generate and interpret. So I like to always bring that up with Copilot, that it's sort of a two-way support tool, right? It's that assistant so that I can go right up to the goal at my organization level and ask it a question like, what percentage are we towards our goal for this particular area of the department or this particular project? And it can just go there and surface it for me versus me having to drill down or be like so lost in the clicking and navigation, right? That's a quick example, but I'm going to let James click through and show you a little bit more. But I'm really excited. I think Copilot and Viva Goals is going to change a lot for a lot of folks. So off to you, James.
Cool. Thanks, Jamie. So yeah, what we're going to do now is just kind of go through what is kind of like a day in the life of somebody using Viva Goals for their team. And so you'll be able to see a little bit about what it looks like and how it can be used. So just kind of coming in, when you open up Viva Goals, you have this really nice dashboard where you can easily see what's going on kind of automatically right off the bat. Over on the left-hand side, you can see that you can pin different organizations or different teams, so that if you're part of marketing or HR, or if you want to see somebody on your team's specific OKRs or yours, you can easily just pin those and track them. Then on the main dashboard, you can see your kind of main goals with your sub goals, and then key initiatives as well. Moving further over to the right, we have you can see the goal owner. So who is that goal assigned to? What team are they on? Is this an organizational goal? Is this a goal for just HR or communications? And then you can see the status and progress of the goal. And so you can easily get a quick snapshot of where that goal is at. And so Viva Goals really, it's designed to help organizations align teams to their strategic priorities and drive those kind of measurable results. And once we click and go through, you can see here that you have your goals, your sub goals and your key initiatives. So what actual tasks are you going to be able to do in order to provide outcomes to those goals? And so Viva Goals allows users to customize what goal setting framework they're most comfortable with. Generally, we see people do the OKR, or the objectives and key results scenario, because that's kind of what Viva Goals is built off of. So you've got specific initiatives associated with those goals. And you can see that these have different departmental owners, and it can take multiple teams to achieve a certain goal. So you can have in one goal tasks that are owned by HR, marketing, communication, and so you can see that it really builds on top of each other. So as we go through, we can dive specifically over here on the left-hand side into a specific team like marketing. And this is really where we're going to see how Copilot can help us out. So it looks like marketing here doesn't really have all of their goals listed out yet, but that's really okay because we can use Copilot, which acts as a personal guide for our goal setting. So users can actually generate goals from specific context, existing files such as a Word document, or just summarize kind of what's on the page and ask questions. And again, you can see that we open up Copilot from the kind of upper right-hand side of the screen. Again, generally where Copilot is, so you kind of always know where it's going to be. But let's say I decide to create a goal from an employee signals report, which is the company's annual employee feedback survey that we did using Viva Glint. So as a team lead, I want to make sure that we set the right goals to address feedback. And so you can see here in Copilot, we can click on Create OKRs from a document, and then it pulls up a list of documents, or we can search and pull up the document that we need. So it's really easy to connect Copilot to existing documents. And you can see here that there's Word, Excel, but it also works in PowerPoint and other documents as well. So then once we click on that, Copilot in Viva Goals returns a specific objective to improve engagement and specific key results on the opportunity areas. So I can choose to accept all of these suggestions, or I can refine them by editing or adding to the list. So I can use Copilot, talk to it again in natural language, and kind of fine tune those goals and those key objectives.
James, can I add something really quick here?
Absolutely.
This just gets me so much. I just love the fact that I think the thing that we've been highlighting with Copilot, regardless of the module we're talking about, is it's saying, hey, this tool, we understand how to help you succeed. And Copilot is now allowing you to translate someone who maybe has never had to think about what an objective is and how to break down those tasks and say, but I do want to have an impact here. Or I am a part of this. And they now have the ability to go into brand new tools to them, potentially like Viva Goals, and understand what they know they need to do, but don't know the how, or necessarily even how to delegate, how this is actually helping them align to that methodology and to how the tool functions. So I just cannot stress enough how amazing this is, because the biggest question I get from clients when we're demoing this or going through or talking about it is they're like, I can absolutely see the value. This is amazing, but I don't know necessarily what this is going to look like, or if everybody can be on the same page. Like, I get it, but I don't know how everyone else who's not, in the same position as me or understands things at a higher level, how this is going to align to their work. So I just have to put pressure here on just how incredible this is, that it's able to not only help you build an objective, but the structure of it, and help you understand how to even measure it. So it's saying, hey, based on that, here's how we can capture it instantly. Now let's start working, right? Let's put it to action. So
yeah,
anyway.
it brings up just a quick point for our previous session. We did one on amplify and using AI to improve your communications. So like explain like I'm five, or simplify and summarize this and things like that. And so not only can it help with the creation of it, but to your point, the ability to share, to distribute that, to understand is really, really powerful. And I will hint that as someone who has done a lot of OKR consulting work, a lot of the work in that space is teaching people how to write good objectives. Is this
exactly?
Is this written as an outcome? Is this written, as a key result with does it at least have something that it's measuring? Like, is it specific enough? If you've ever heard the SMART, SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound, right? Those monikers, like a lot of those patterns can be supported with AI as well. So 100%, very, very exciting stuff. I'll pass it back.
No, yeah, completely awesome. I see, and just going on to your points, we see a lot of customers that they really want to get into Viva Goals. They like it, but it's again understanding that OKR methodology and really okay, how do I structure this? Like, I have a document that lists out everything that we want to accomplish, but how do I translate it into a goal setting so that we can track progress and all that kind of stuff? And so Copilot here is going to be absolutely amazing for that. So once we kind of get those suggestions from Copilot, if we like those, we can go ahead and ask Copilot to actually recommend further initiatives to achieve this goal. And so the initiatives are really the specific tasks that you're going to undertake in order to achieve the objectives of that overall goal. And so once you have those initiatives, that really helps you make progress on those key results and the objectives as a whole. And so we can see when we ask Copilot for that, it gives us out the green boxes are going to be the initiatives. And so we can really see those specific tasks that Copilot's recommending, based on that goal that we had earlier. And so the cool thing is that once you're satisfied with the goals and how to achieve them, we can actually just click save these OKRs. And what it's going to do is automatically publish those into the marketing OKRs or whatever team that we're on. So we don't have to worry about, copying and pasting and trying to restructure. Like, it's automatically going to put it in there for us. And then we can go ahead and refine those as we need to, reorder them, and kind of put our own spin on it once it's in there and we have that kind of baseline from the Copilot. And then you can see that, the owner is kind of all the same person right now. So once again, you have your goals in there, you can go ahead and update the owner. So you can, if it's specific to HR or marketing, you can go ahead and put those correct people in there, so that then you can track progress on those goals.
I want to say it's not just for progress either. It's also, they will know, right? They'll know that they're assigned. They'll have that singular place to check. Just so we're clear on language too. It's not just for visibility. It is a tool that will engage them, right? And draw them back into the tool to make sure that they are putting those updates in there, or that if we're looking at things like the automatic integrations, if you're using other platforms and tools, that those things are automatically syncing and feeding back. So they don't have to have this task on their plate to check goals every day. It's like, do what you do to do your job and know that goals is now integrating those updates and that it is a point for you to come back to and have visible. But yeah, I just want to make clear, it's not just a visibility tool. That's just this huge benefit. It is also, engaging them across the process.
And so then also here we can see that, bringing goals into the flow of everyday work, such as preparing for an executive review, it's not super useful if you can't export the goals. But so goals actually makes it really easy to share out the entire organization structure and goals in a really nice way. And so you can see here that the three most commonly kind of requested file types are PowerPoint, Excel, or a CSV file. And so for this portion, we'll go ahead and choose PowerPoints. And then I can choose to export it just as a list or have like the entire goal structure out in expanded detail. But so we can just click list, and then we'll go ahead and click export. And so now you'll see that it downloads the file into PowerPoint, and it's laid out awesomely. So this is great for doing those executive updates and those presentations. So you can see you have a really nice slide that clearly lays out your objectives, the key results that you need to achieve those objectives, as well as the current last month target progress and the status. So just a really, really nice way to kind of lay all of that out and be able to share status report updates without like kind of dragging people through a Viva goals dashboard. And then now we'll go back to the Viva Goals app. And it's really great to have company goals that are visible to the whole company. But what really helps drive the alignment is seeing, what other teams are working on that kind of ladder up to the company's goals. So if we see here, we can go to our alignment view, which really allows us to track a common thread across a single view. So if we click on that, in the alignment view, we can see all the different goals and their specific key results and initiatives that are associated with that, and the details of their owners and the status and all of that. So you get a quick kind of layout of the different goals under a company, the initiatives, key objectives, and a quick overall status report as well. But if you click further, so if we click further into that, we can actually get deeper in those goals as well. So we can go to those sub goals and we can see, okay, what is marketing responsible for? What is HR responsible for? And you can kind of break it down at those levels. And then even going forward, you can break it down even further and get this really nice dashboard of kind of your overall main company goals and objectives, and then break it down into those key initiatives and sub goals across the board. And so that way you can get a nice overview of what's going on across the entire company. And with that, I will hand it back to Richard to kind of give us an overview of Microsoft 365 chat.
Lovely. So I'll take back control there. And so I wanted to use a quick demo to explain another concept. So we've seen, how this can help with objective visibility. We've seen how it can help with different experiences and flow through. I thought it'd be really good here just to talk about how it can also AI is changing how people work. So far we've talked about the experience in Viva Goals. As mentioned, if you buy Viva Goals, $4 per user per month, or you buy the suite, you're going to get Copilot and all these experiences of Copilot in the Viva suite. In addition to that, though, some people might use something like Microsoft 365 and have Copilot for Microsoft 365. If you yourself have played with this or you've seen it, I want to explain how it's changing how people manage because it's having a really big impact. And we're starting to see, I think, the very early stages of the consequences of an AI enriched workforce. So here's a really simple example. Did anything happen yesterday with Fabricam? And then what we're seeing here is it's summarizing, okay, let me look across the organization and see if I can find emails and documents and other things that have been updated relating to that subject. Then as it pulls that together, it's giving me a quick summary. Now, this is interesting. Obviously, the sequence here is that we're preparing for a meeting about Fabricam and we're using that data and information. However, you can actually use this in other ways as well. So you could say something like, did anything happen yesterday with, instead of a customer or a product, or last week or last month, by the way, the time frames can be bigger. You can say, what did anything happen yesterday with Jamie? Or did anything happen yesterday with James? Or did anything happen yesterday with the modern work Viva team? And so when I ask those questions, it will aggregate those signals across SharePoint activity, like your documents and updates and things like that, to the signals that we see across Teams and email. And because I pull that information together and AI is assisting me in that, it means that I can start to be a lot more proactive in my management style. So let's say I have a one-on-one coming up with Jamie or James. I could come into that meeting having an idea of what they've been up to. And I don't need to ask for, we call it low value transactional work. I don't need to ask them like, tell me what happened. Like, what have you been up to? What have you changed? Instead, I can say, hey, there's this one item that I actually think you've been working on. So let's just make sure you understand what that is. And we're talking about the same thing. I expect a lot more of that to be coming. We expect like a lot more pipeline or demand for that. And so how can I help you, scaffold, prepare, et cetera, for that? It changes the nature of our discussion because I'm coming in more armed with more information. Now, you could do this today. Even without Copilot, you could go and look at SharePoint activity signals. You can go look at, if you've ever looked at people's profiles, you can find this information. But it's a lot of time and energy, and it's really differentiated by those who have really high digital dexterity or digital fitness versus those who don't. So it's a bit of a gap because it's less accessible, a lot of these insights. And now it's way easier to understand with these Copilot tools, but more importantly, it can make us more armed for those discussions. So imagine for a moment you're having these discussions around alignment and other things like that. Think of where today you don't have a lot of opportunity time to discuss how do we optimize our priorities? How do we talk about, that higher level picture, that strategy? Well, believe it or not, when you start to use these AI tools, you start to find a lot of the low value collaboration, the low impact stuff gets translated into usage with the AI tools, which is much more efficient and faster and easier. And then the higher value collaboration, which is more aligned with what we're talking about, objectives, things like that, that's what you're getting time back for. So I wanted to highlight that if you compound these things together, the changes that we're seeing, and this, by the way, you can do some of what I'm describing just with the free Copilot, right? The Copilot that's built in kind of Bing for Business type Copilot, Bing Chat. That experience as well has some impacts on the way people manage. So in each of these sequences, we're seeing an acceleration on digital management. We're seeing an increased demand and expectation around digital managers. And when you combine those two things together, we're really seeing this change in the way we manage. And so today, I think the key is with goals specifically, we can increase our understanding and prioritization. And those are two things that are really critical, especially as we've shifted to more remote work and hybrid work, because we often have more transactional dialogue. Think of like those meetings that you have, the work that you're doing. You don't have as much of that time to talk through some of this stuff that would automatically light up if we had broader, more genericized discussions. And so you need tools to complement the fact that not just the water coolers, but like that after meeting and before meeting discussions, they often don't happen the same way when we're using digital meetings. All right, so let's talk about the future of management with AI. The first one is all this stuff about goals is really easy to implement on the technical side. So if you're worried like, hey, my IT department hasn't enabled goals or we haven't enabled it in our organization, it's literally what you see in this checklist. It's really easy to do. Takes like half a day of work. It's straightforward. So the technical complexity of establishing Viva goals, even the integration scenarios that we were discussing earlier, is pretty straightforward. Where it's challenging is to understand how are you going to mature your own organization, right? Because we can't just roll this out to every employee and then expect them to immediately adapt and use these tools. Although AI and Copilot makes it easier, there's still learning, there's change management, there's transfer of knowledge there. And so you want to figure out how do we pilot and how do we scale this? And the first piece of feedback we've seen is that a lot of organizations will tackle this and they'll add it as an extra motion to your business rhythm. We do not recommend that. So think of it like this. You have a business rhythm. At the end of a quarter, you prep for the next quarter. At the end of the fiscal, you prep for the next fiscal, right? You're doing these motions. Instead of doing anything different, do the exact same things you're doing. Have those meetings, create those meeting notes, create those business plan documents, whatever it is that you're doing. And then just use Copilot to extract from those things and basically save you a ton of documentation time in storing them in a better way using something like Viva Goals. And so now we're not adding to those check-in motions. We're not adding, which is a bad practice. We're using the strategy meetings that we're already doing, that we're using those Connect meetings, and we're just blending Copilot and Viva Goals directly into that flow. And this means that when you look at those rhythms, whether it's fiscally, quarterly, et cetera, when you look at those rhythms, what you're doing is you're doing a creation cycle at the beginning, typically of each of those quarters, and you're doing a close cycle. If we have more time, I'd love to explain. Close is a really important thing, KR methodologies that people don't spend enough time on. But again, both of those things don't need to be new additional effort. It's really amplifying what you're already doing in a better way. So think of like optimization versus major change there. And when you combine those things, the last thing that's really important is how do we make it accessible, visible? So far you've shown examples of you go to goals and you use it in these ways. But keep in mind, if you're using Copilot for Microsoft 365 or other tools, you can do the same type of dialogue where I'm just saying, hey, can you help me set a goals for the next few priorities or projects I have? And all of a sudden it can create goals, obviously at that lower level for you, right? So in this particular sequence or example, we're seeing it's generating those goals. And the same thing you saw before, it's doing all of that on the fly, but it's doing it without having to go to the goals interface. That could be done by email. That could be done by a variety of different places. I get an email and it has some stuff from someone asking like, here's our new goals. And then I can say, well, help me rationalize these for what I need to achieve, and then have a natural language conversation to tweak and augment that so that now I can update my goals. Or how do I update my goals in this more natural way, right? Okay, can you update the whatever goals? And then it helps you find which goals those are and even execute some of those updates for you. Again, I'm not saying that's available today, but those are things that are for sure coming. And so those improvements that we see in how we access and interpret and work with these tools is a really key driver. And that making it visible is something we've all learned, right? If you're like me and you're trying to work on your both fitness, health-wise, and your digital fitness, then you put out those, you put out your gym equipment, you put stuff out the day before, the night before. So when you wake up, it's all there, right? Like everything is sequenced to grab your bag, whatever it is that you need to go work out. And then you have less excuses, right? It's that much easier. Same thing. We want to make our change and our leadership and how we're using these tools very visible. And so one of the great things is Microsoft is helping you in that journey. One of the ways they do that is when you look up things like org charts, right? Think of what's a very common employee experience. Well, I'm trying to find people in the organization, trying to understand what they're up to. I can actually look at goals. And that's a really powerful thing. When you look at a person, seeing their recent documents is powerful because you get a feeling for what they've been working on. When you see their goals, you understand that role or you understand where they fit within that team hierarchy. That becomes really valuable because it's about the outcomes. It's what is their priorities? What are they really working on? That becomes really great for understanding the business, right? And again, shortening that onboarding cycle in the business, improving reboarding and optimization of performance. And another example of this as well, we showed something similar when you looked at skills in Viva Learning, but the ability to be able to see like goals for individuals. So you look up on an individual, you're like, hey, what's Cameron Evans' organization up to? What are their priorities? How do those correlate to mine? It can be a really great way to explore things because again, we are people, right? We connect with each other as humans, as people in our organization, not just processes, not just data and content. And so an employee experience is all about making sure that those people connections are more visible and upfront. And I think they've done a great job here. Now, this can all bring up a big question of how do we implement this? So for sure, a roadmap will help you a lot. Coming up with a strategy, goals. I cannot express enough. It's often overlooked. If you have corporate comms friends, if you have people that run intranet teams and things like that focus on employee engagement, goals is a key tool in improving employee engagement. It helps people understand why they're doing what they're doing. It helps them understand purpose. It helps them understand priority, right? And their sense of value in the organization is often represented by the outcomes and objectives that they're helping achieve, and of course the overall objectives of the organization. So goals can be a really important tool in a variety of roadmaps, from corporate comms and your intranet or digital workplace tooling to your employee experience, as we've mentioned today, or even, of course, the traditional performance management and optimization stuff that you might want to do. And it doesn't need to take a long time. In most organizations, an eight-week or even a 2-week rhythm sometimes you can get away with if you want to really streamline it. But you don't need to spend a ton of time getting this going, because once people start to translate their goals and see them, it's very addicting in an organizational context, very addicting. And so you'll see that change kind of happen naturally. Do you have any other comments, Jamie?
No, I just totally agree. It's just the same situation, watching the adoption of, I think it's so ironic, Copilot, but watching it be this totally new tool and consumers using it, and now employees being, sort of demanding it, and people at first going, God, I don't know what this is going to look like, if people are even we're going to buy all these licenses, and then who knows if they're going to use it. And to your point, Richard, it's as soon as you see this tangible, like, I've translated what I do to this language like 2 or 3 times, people are now going, oh my gosh, okay, now I can do this. And all of a sudden it really is like shifting your framing of thinking. And it's not even very much. Like I said, I like to use this term a lot, and I use this in our other sessions too. It's not about being an expert data scientist. It's not about being an expert goal writer. It's like, you are an expert in your business. You know what you need to accomplish. You now have these tools that are helping you do this in a really structured and effective way. So when we start to go, oh, okay, now I know how to reframe this request or prompt or now goal, so that this is a way that other people can understand it, and it's going to cascade. And I think it only takes a few times for people to get the hang of that. And soon they're like, wow, I saw so much more benefit to framing this way, because now everybody else contributed more effectively or coached me in asking my question better, because they knew what they needed from me and were able to land on some key language. So yeah, I just think you're so right. I just wanted to reiterate that your point, I think, is painted perfectly. And I think it's worthwhile when you're finding a bit of misalignment internally, or you're not sure. If you ask yourself today, do we have purpose and alignment? You might not, if you have to ask yourself that. And so now you kind of see the tools that are there to make this easier.
Yeah, empowering your capital L leaders and lowercase l leaders, right? So that they
exactly.
can lead. Without these types of patterns, it's really difficult.
And the sharing. That's
absolutely.
what's one other thing is important.
And so, so here's some ideas on how you might roll it out. So maybe you start with a launch where you have high visibility, and then you kind of model it based on specific teams and groups, squads, if you prefer that language, of people working with these OKRs. And once you start to see the goals lit up in the tool, it becomes really obvious, especially as we talk through those closeout motions. Like, let's think about, how did that quarter go? Because it's not about just achieving every objective. It's a lot about, what do we learn that's critical that we need to adapt as we move forward, right? Because a lot of times you actually don't achieve objectives. It's a whole thing. You score and you say it's like a 7 score instead of a 10 score, but it's still maybe way off on the objective, but it's still counted as a success because you adapted the business and made forward momentum. So some guidelines for work breakdowns and things to think about in those pilots as well. Again, let's have a chat if you're looking for these things and you're looking for guidance there. And then, you already mentioned it. AI is such a transformative technology. It's changing how people work. So we've highlighted in previous ones how you use like learning, how you use Glint, how you use other tools. But actually, goals is a really powerful tool to talk about AI transformation in your work. Everyone wants to know about it, right? Like, let's be clear. You have to talk about it. Just like you talked about, hopefully, your digital transformation and your hybrid work journey. Now you need to really openly and transparently talk about your AI transformation. So it's great to be able to have like a guiding principle, which is an objective or outcome. We want to make sure that every employee in our organization has access to the best AI tools, because we can see it as a competitive advantage for each individual, and blah, blah, blah. So you'll have your statements like that, and then you'll have ways in which you're measuring that. So we're going to have pilots of Copilot generically for everyone because that's relatively free and low cost. And then you're going to have this idea of, okay, Copilot for Microsoft 365 will be rolled out in this way. Viva experiences with Copilot will be rolled out in this way. And the more you break that down, the more you can start to see how this cascading of even something as simple as a deployment strategy and rollout and transformation journey that you're on for AI could actually be really effectively represented using these tools. So we have some other screenshots and slides there to help you through understanding that. There's some adoption resources, very, very useful to take a look at because they actually have suggestions on what those goals might be for Copilot, as well as literally a breakdown of those things I was discussing, like satisfaction, how are people using it for productivity versus quality, all sorts of different operational discussions that are important because performance is definitely driven by Copilot. It's the biggest measure that we talked about at the very beginning of the series. We talked about productivity gains and quality gains, and we see those substantially here.
Yeah, and on the adoption piece, and that we sorry, Richard, I just know we're at time. I just want to make this last comment. I know we're going to wrap this up and go into discussion too soon. But around like adoption support, Richard as a partner is to lead can absolutely help you with something like that. Also, for any of the folks who've joined who are aligned with managed accounts and have something like our unified support, we also have things like OKRs in a day, right? So things like training your employees or your sort of goal writers, et cetera, whoever you'd select, who can essentially start to get some of these adoption teams together and start to really drive a lot of success. So we definitely offer things through, like I said, partners. We've got public facing events as well. And our adoption materials are wonderful that Richard's brought up here. But I just wanted to say that for anyone who had to drop off now, that please let us know because your unified contracts absolutely come with a ton of usually credits to get some what we call proactive accelerators on some of those things. So
and pilots, standardized pilots funded as well.
Yes, standardized pilots is definitely something we have for goals right now. Yeah.
And so, let's just kind of wrap up with this key concept. You haven't seen the demand for new management. You will see it. The demand on leaders and managers is going to accelerate. And a lot of it is kind of being delayed as people don't quite understand the impacts of AI. That acceleration curve, both of us learning and adapting it in the organization, is going to also expect new ways in management. Just like, before the pandemic, you might have managed a certain way. And now after, especially a few years after the pandemic, you manage probably very differently from a digital perspective. Now you're going to see that same expectation and demand when it comes to, goals, alignment, these other things. So it's really important to start with this journey now. Otherwise, you really will fall a bit behind.